The make Ceph ADM faster and more scalable document will probably have future documentation impact, and it doesn't require us to do anything but be aware of. That's in the notes, or it's in the minutes. I am continuing to work on a Ceph DF pull request. There are 5 fields left in it to define. Josh has gotten back to me in the last few hours on that. I just got up, so I just woke up, so I'll have to look at that later today. There is an issue in the Ceph FS documentation where the top level links were not working. Josh Collin brought this to my attention, and it was because there's a mixture of talk trees and sections being used in the Ceph FS guide. Originally, I was going to completely change the way that was done, but after talking to Patrick, who's in charge of the Ceph FS of Ceph FS development, I've decided to close that pull request and make another run at it when I understand a little bit more about how it's set up. And so now to new business. Inspired by Anthony last week, and also doing some work on the Ceph DF bug, I noticed that there was a lot of little things in the Ceph ADM installation guide, which is the primary way that we have on the website for people to install Ceph, that there were a number of things that could be improved. So with great tedium, I spent 3 days earlier this week building the documents over and over again and getting all of the procedures exactly in order. There were some misnumbered ordered lists, and I am awaiting comment on that from Josh and Neha and Kefu. The other, so 2 more pieces of new business before Sanford's presentation. There's a release notes pipeline, which is, I suppose, less for the people in this meeting and more for the leadership team. We need to make sure that all of the team leads know that there is a central place where they can put their release notes so that they can be edited. So that they don't look like they're engineer written, so they look like they're professionally written. And then Lynn's brought up in the Ceph leadership team meeting yesterday that the dashboard documentation links don't work on Octopus. So there are these tooltip things that come up when you parts of the dashboard. And since we've moved to read the docs in order to provide a working search on the docs, that doesn't work. So we're still in the first 12 hours of figuring out what's going on there. And that was less time than I thought. With that, Sanford wants to talk about getting better documentation of the Rados protocol and other stuff. So over to Sanford Miller of DigitalOcean.
Right now, Rados is sort of amazingly consistent and amazingly reliable, and also sort of a black box that has some sort of 2 negative consequences. One being that there's sort of a few core maintainers who I can only imagine are very busy. And then the other one is that there's sort of a lot of new potential features and use cases that aren't really possible right now because most Ceph developers, even people who are generally quite experienced with Ceph, but still most Ceph developers don't feel comfortable making contributions that would require them to implement any part of the Rados protocol. So I think the real sort of opportunity that's being missed out on here is smarter clients. Seems unlikely that people are going to want to rewrite the OSDs and the mons, like the server, so to speak, of Ceph. But there's definitely interest in improving the Ceph clients and even writing new ones. So the Ceph client is already quite smart, and that's actually sort of why it's such an opportunity to make it even smarter. Like a lot of the core infrastructure in terms of like reliability and authentication and all that jazz is already there. And some of these more advanced features would be relatively easy to implement because that strong foundation is already there. I'm not going to go over all the things on this slide because in the interest of time, and it would be boring. But I will say on hypervisor caching would be like a huge performance game changer for Rados block device. And I'll also say, so DigitalOcean uses Ceph, which is basically sort of a thin wrapper for live Rados. Ceph, the performance overhead incurred by the Seago runtime makes it not good for data plane use cases. It generally works quite well, but when it doesn't, it's quite opaque and can be challenging to debug. So those are things we'd be very interested in improving. Basically, DigitalOcean would be interested in working on all of the things on this slide at some point in the future. And these things don't seem very company specific. So hopefully these are things that there is lots of other companies and organizations that are probably also interested in having smarter clients that do some or all of these things and other things as well, depending on their use case. So that's all well and good. There's obviously some like benefits here. This is definitely hard. I will also say the Rados code base is just huge and it changes all the time. And I think it's easy to think, oh, it's just not worth the effort, and that's kind of fair. It would be a ton of effort to document the whole thing. So I want to sort of propose a partial solution to that concern, which I think is a fair concern, which is I think the work could be made manageable by focusing effort on documenting the Rados protocol messages specifically, not as a sort of subset of the greater Rados thing. And I think that would do most of the work, like that's sort of necessary here, because for sort of potential developers of smarter clients, what they really need to know is not like all the internals of Rados and how it's implemented in the existing code base. What they really need to know is what is the contract that they're being held to with the server, and the language that contract is written in is the language of Rados protocol messages, of the messages that the server is going to send to them, and of the messages that they are required to send back in order to maintain. If you cover that, like it's high, like most of the important information for enabling smarter clients is out there. So here are a few ideas I have for sort of possible formats this documentation could take. I'm not strongly pushing for any of these ideas. I'm just throwing them out there. I want to start brainstorming, putting these ideas out there. I will say that these sort of serialization diagrams for the wire protocol were quite helpful for me. And so maybe something like that would be in order. But mainly I want to know sort of what do other people who are watching the call think, who are like the experts on Ceph, think would be the best way to format this documentation of Rados protocol messages and how to go about that so that hopefully there can be more smarter clients in the future. Okay, that is the presentation. So yeah, what do you think?
Great. Thank you, Sanford. I am in favor of documenting the protocol messages as like the very first step. I also agree that if we try to document the Rados code base, then the sands shift like impossibly. And when Josh and I first talked about it, he was like, well, anybody who can read the actual commits themselves can just see what was done, and abstracting that away would be too costly. But then Neha was like, I really like the idea of the diagrams. So it looks like that's what we're gonna pursue. Sorry, I think Anthony was going to talk.
No, I didn't have anything to add.
Okay. Sorry, misinterpreted. So yeah, I guess this means that I will go to the Rados meetups or the Rados meetings, and I'll see if you can go to those, Sanford. I'm not actually sure right now.
Okay.
Do you have like? I'm here at least for another 6 months, I think. Do you have a timeline that you want to get this thing done by?
Yes, it's not a rush. I think the timeline to have some of this done would be the end of the year, hopefully. I don't think that's probably every message, but like the core, that's sort of the hope, is that we can start doing some of the implementing 2021.
Yeah, that lines up with what I was thinking. End of the year, and then maybe something a little bit more complete by the release of Octopus in March.
Yeah, that would be a very good time frame.
Okay. Is there anything else on that?
I don't have anything else in particular, unless there are any questions.
Not yet. I'm sure there will be specific questions, but you know.
Yeah.
So the other thing, which is not in the notes, but I want to mention, is that Anthony made these massive contributions to the docs over the last 2 weeks, and so that caused me to read through line by line aloud. I actually read everything that you wrote aloud, Anthony. It took hours. Yeah. So thank you very much to Anthony for doing a line edit on some of our documentation. And that's, unless you guys have any sort of new business or anything that you want to, I mean, Sanford just brought up this new documentation initiative, but anything that you want attention given to, that's going to be it for the meeting. Does anybody have anything?
Well, as I went through, doing, kind of the dumb stuff, capitalization, and, Ceph is capitalized, it's not an acronym, and it's not lowercase. That kind of stuff is easy. But as I got into the operations documents, I found I had to resist the rabbit hole factor, because increasingly found that a lot of it is really old. I mean, some of the things that I did were to, there were places where it, file store was the only back end, and it talked about the new Kraken release. So there's a lot of old stuff in there, and I had to resist the urge to just get it all and start over. With that one document, I came close, as you saw. And so, I mean, there were documents in there that I had to force myself not to touch, because they pretty much, they need to be gutted to bring them up to be modern. And, one of the questions is, and I don't have a good answer for this, is how do we balance keeping things fresh versus not undocumenting anything older than 15 minutes, because not everybody can run the latest version. Master.
I have a strong opinion about this, but I offer it for discussion. There are things in our docs that go back to 2012 that have just been sitting there since 2012. Until about 4 or 5 months ago, I think that there were places where it referred to 2013 and 2016 as though those were contemporary. And what I would prefer is that every time we do a release, we start over again completely from the ground up and then build everything. That doesn't mean that we have to rewrite every single guide, but it means that we review every aspect of the documentation, determine whether it's baby or bathwater. Does it stay in the new version, or does it remain in the old version? And I also, I'm in a way just repeating what you said, but the force of what you said is on my mind every day of my professional life. I don't want to start changing stuff so that we get into a ministry of truth situation where the sentence that I was just looking for isn't here anymore. And so with Octopus, that'll be the first time that I am on board for the development of new documentation from the beginning. I would like to do that for Octopus. We have about 5 months before the release of Octopus. And I would like to...
I think you mean Pacific.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean Pacific, not Octopus. Octopus was one where they run in Ceph ADM. In fact, I just realized I've been saying Octopus.
One of the things was, putting Ceph ADM in there. How much, does every sentence begin with if? Or, do we just, put something in there saying, for, beginning of a document saying, for, using, file store or, Upstart or whatever, go look at the Nautilus documentation or something. And do we, how much of the older stuff do we carry forward? Because, as Alex knows, I'm sure there are plenty of people running both mixed file store and blue store clusters because completely repaving them is not always possible, for example. And so, how much of the do we, put that in there, and how much do we rely on, if you learn about older stuff, go back and look at, edit the URL kind of a thing.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Anthony. I didn't mean to interrupt.
And so, one of the reasons why I stopped was, well, one, not to continue overburdening you and, robbing myself of sleep, but also I wanted to get some of those ideas before I put a bunch of work into what might not have been the best approach for modernizing those other documents.
When I started my very first task, Sage wanted what he called a crisp installation guide. And so I bought these cheap Intel NUCs and set up a basic Ceph cluster. But this was before Octopus and before Ceph ADM, and they were still using Ceph deploy, which I assume a lot of people still use to deploy Ceph. And then 3 weeks after I had created this document, which was this 10-page document that was linear, and what you're talking about ifs and these conditional sentences, I think of the golden age of microcomputer documentation is like the Commodore 64 guide, all the early Apple II stuff, where there's on the first page of the Commodore 64 users guide, it says find the thing in the box that looks like a typewriter, and then over the next 110 pages, it takes you through to poking values into memory directly. So it steps you through, but the assumption there is that you have the kit, you have all the same hardware, and so it's like the same architecture. And when I started naively, I was like, okay, well, this is how you set up Ceph, so now I have this document. And then over the months, it came oh no, the potential architectures on which this piece of software is going to be deployed they ramify and ramify and ramify, and there's no way to know exactly what anybody's going to do. So I have this deeply inbuilt desire to ship a standard kit to everybody and then build an understanding based on that standard kit and then trust the reader to be able to develop their knowledge from there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like, I'm not dogmatic about this. If that's the wrong approach, ultimately, I'm willing to change my mind about it. But
because Ceph ADM, Rook, Ceph deploy, any of the other things that people have, and I struggled with that in the book too. And it's like, okay, I need to have some installation example, but I can't document everybody's installation, so I kind of punted and just put in, I think, a Ceph Ansible, Ceph Ansible or Ceph ADM or Rook, and we've heard, over time, it's like, oh, Ceph deploy is a thing. Oh no, Ceph deploy is going away. Oh wait, no, Ceph deploy is the thing. Oh no, everything is going to be Rook. Oh no, now it's Ceph Ansible. Oh, and kind of the moving target, and so modulo, Red Hat, favoring Red Hat solutions. And I don't have a good answer for this either. Is what do we try to document? What do we try to include and what we not try to include in there? And so, I'm happy for some guidance there as I dig into the thornier parts of the documents that need to be updated.
I hate to be so unsatisfying, but I think that this is a real problem. Like, you've touched an actual problem that is, it's probably not just us. It's every software. It's probably every single software project that works on multiple architectures. Anything that's not just like an Arduino with a shipped IDE that puts the sketch on the Arduino or whatever, like, something analogous to that. I went through the same thing with the packages on as of about a year ago, there was a section on the install page that had I think now it's just DNF and Zipper, or maybe Yum and Zipper, but there used to be a list of different package names. And then I went through this period where I realized that Docker on Debian-based systems is called Docker. The package is docker.io, but on Red Hat-based systems it's Docker. And then I just cut that. And
Docker CE. I mean, Alex says, remember, how I worked to sanify at DO. There were 3 separate Docker packages installed depending on when the server happened to have been preceded.
There was a period of time, I think about 2014, 2015, where Docker, there was it was a desktop environment doc for a while as well. And so there was a lot of documentation back then that had to be modified. And so what I decided was, with the exception of the Red Hat and SUSE, DNF and Zipper, I don't remember if it's Yum and Zipper anyway, we would gesture in the direction of those packages and then leave it to each of the individual distros to handle their own documentation. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's no more satisfying and no more insightful than what you just said, which I think is about the limit. It's the reason that they hire people with human judgment and don't write shell scripts to do it is because it requires judgment in every case, which makes it.
Yeah, and in Ceph's case, it's deliberately anti-vendor lock-in, and so it's much flexibility that it's. The last time I used this phrase, I got called on it, but freedom is slavery.
Yeah,
the Orwellian sense.
There's 2 Orwell references in this conversation.
Yeah, it's so flexible. There's so many things that it's difficult to know what how to document it without making it such a mess of ifs that it's impossible to read.
Well, I favor rendering some territory of the information legible and having that as the central path, and assuming that the completely ignorant reader will come to it and be able to read through, like just follow through this main path, and then they'll have enough skills to then start making their own decisions.
That was kind of the philosophy when I wrote the book, that where it was structured differently than the first edition was, where it was learning Ceph, not everything you can do with it.
There's a place for the everything you can do it, like the cookbook. Once you have the basic skills, like this is a spoon, this is a pot, then I think so. Anyway, I separate these in my mind into, and I know we're running low on time here. I separate these two things in my mind into tutorial on the one hand and reference on the other. Like you need tutorial so that you can learn what even is this, so that you can begin to generate questions you don't even know that you have yet. All you know is like, I want to do a thing, but I don't know any of the, like I have an end goal in mind, but that end goal might be like produce antimatter, and that might be impossible, and I might have to come up with a simpler end goal that can actually be practically achieved.
Do you think we might benefit by restructuring of the docs directory along those lines?
I have been working toward exactly that sort of thing. I have been slowly building these I don't want to say mores, but like customs in, like you do this sort of thing in documentation in the following way. And this is all building up to a fundamental new taxonomy of the docs. However, like,
and there's a fair amount of duplication in there now too.
Tons. There are 3 different Ceph ADM deployment guides, and I want to kill 2 of them. But every one of those requires delicate political negotiation with people, because I'm sensitive. I'm old enough now that I'm sensitive to all the work that everybody has done. If I was younger, I would just be like, let's rip all this out and start over. But now, like, I know that this page, even though it might be old, people have it in their head as like a thing that they refer to. It reminds them, it keeps them on the path that they're used to, and I don't want to mess with that until we know exactly what we want to do. So to answer your question,
so long as the docs of the older versions remain there, adjust the URL, or if there's link somewhere, and I think that can mitigate that to an extent. Because we can't be tied to the past forever.
Agreed.
I mean, when you end up with the reference NTPD.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with, is riddled with. I mean, it served us well for decades, but it's riddled legacies, and that's why Crony is so much better. It doesn't have the baggage.
If we can, what you've done already is almost like the beginning of a pilot project in restructuring the docs. I mean, we bring this stuff up to date, but then eventually it's not just going to be on the syntactic or the technical level from sentence to sentence, but eventually we will get around the same time, or around the turn of the year. I would also like to be changing the structure of the docs. And I would like to standardize it so that it's either all using talk trees or all using sections. But again, each of these different guides was built by a specific team, and they had their own ways of doing it. So,
you can tell which documents are written by the same person, even by the style and usage and so forth.
It's like a city that grew together out of many different little towns where they have different standards. It's like when Václav Chicherin and Gravity's Rainbow goes in to impose the new Turkic alphabet on the people who live in Kyrgyz. That's exactly what it is. It's a ridiculous analogy, but I want to do exactly what you want to do, but I want to have something really good to offer all of these developers who are not thinking about the structure of the documentation at all. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in now. I want to have something to offer them.
People come and go, and
there have been I know 3 docs guys before me. I'm 2 minutes over. I'm really sorry for running 2 minutes over.
Yeah, we're not going to solve it all today.
Yeah, but please do feel free to show up and keep bringing it up, because if you don't, I will, and I might not do it exactly the way that you want it to be carried forward.
Yep,
But
just
yeah,
looking for guidance so I can contribute most effectively.
What you've done, I really appreciate, like getting the technical details in there, and I thank you very much.
You bet. Happy to contribute.
All right. If there's nothing else, then I'm gonna call it. Right. Thanks for showing up, Sanford and Alex. See you guys.